The laughter in the polished oak room was colder than the wind outside, while her siblings displayed victorious smiles, holding deeds to mansions and keys to luxury cars. They pointed at Grace with contempt. The reason? She had just inherited what everyone called the family trash, a falling-apart tool shed hidden in the far corners of the property. "At least you'll have somewhere to store your disappointment," mocked her older brother as they expelled her from the main house. Grace said not a word. She only clutched against her chest a small brass key that her grandfather had secretly given her before he passed. What no one in that room knew, and what would make them beg for forgiveness in less than 24 hours, is that old Samuel Miller never made a wrong move. That night, under the light of a weak lantern and the smell of old wood, Grace discovered that the walls of that shack didn't just hold dust, they held a multi-million-dollar secret. Get ready to witness the exact moment when humiliation transformed into an empire. If you believe that life's greatest riches are hidden where the greedy cannot see, subscribe to this channel. Here, we tell the stories of those the world underestimated, but life exalted. Hit that like button so this story can reach someone who needs to remember that greed reveals character, and character determines destiny. Because what Grace found inside that coffin changed the Miller family history forever. And the look on her siblings' faces when they realized what they'd lost, priceless. The Miller family mansion sat on 200 acres of prime Iowa farmland, a testament to 3 generations of accumulated wealth. But as attorney James Morrison read Samuel Miller's last will and testament on that cold November afternoon, the ornate sitting room felt more like a battlefield than a place of mourning. Samuel Miller had died peacefully in his sleep 2 weeks earlier at the age of 84. He'd been a brilliant engineer and inventor, a man who'd built the family fortune through innovation and hard work. But in his final years, as his children and grandchildren circled like vultures, he'd seen their true nature. Grace sat quietly in the corner, the only one wearing actual mourning clothes. A simple black dress, her brown hair pulled back, her eyes red from genuine tears. At 28, she was the youngest grandchild, a nurse who'd spent the last 6 months caring for Samuel when everyone else was too busy with their own lives. Her brother Richard, 42, a corporate attorney with a 6-figure salary that never seemed enough, sat front and center, leaning forward eagerly. Next to him was their sister Caroline, 39, who ran a luxury real estate business and wore diamonds that caught the light with every impatient gesture. 3 cousins filled out the room, Marcus, Victoria, and Dennis, all in their 30s, all checking their phones every few minutes, all calculating their shares. Attorney Morrison cleared his throat. "To my son Richard, I leave the Miller family mansion at 1847 Oakwood Drive, along with $800,000 from my primary accounts." Richard's smile was instant and smug. He'd already been planning renovations. "To my daughter Caroline, I leave my collection of 3 vintage automobiles, the beach house in California, and $600,000. Caroline actually laughed with delight, already texting her friends. "To my grandson Marcus, $400,000 and the commercial property downtown. To my granddaughter Victoria, $300,000 and my investment portfolio. To my grandson Dennis, $200,000 and the recreational properties in Colorado." The mood in the room was jubilant. They'd all gotten exactly what they'd been angling for. Grace noticed none of them had asked about the funeral arrangements or whether Samuel had any final messages. They'd already moved on. "Now," Attorney Morrison continued, his voice taking on a different tone, "there is one final provision. For my granddaughter Grace, who asked for nothing but gave everything, who sat by my bedside when I was sick, who listened to my stories when everyone else was too busy, I leave a choice." Grace looked up, surprised to be mentioned at all. Grace may choose between a cash payment of $75,000 to be paid immediately, or she may choose to inherit the old tool shed at the eastern boundary of the property, along with all its contents and the half-acre of land it sits on. The room exploded in laughter. "The shed!" Richard was the first to speak, his voice dripping with mockery. "Dad left her the old shed, the one that's literally falling apart?" Caroline joined in. "Oh, Grace, I'm so sorry. That place is a condemned hazard. We were going to tear it down next month anyway. Marcus laughed. At least you'll have somewhere to store your disappointment. Grace felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she remained silent, remembering Samuel's words from 3 days before he died. He'd gripped her hand with surprising strength and whispered, "When they read the will, choose the shed. Trust me, Gracie. Choose the shed." Attorney Morrison held up his hand. Miss Grace must make her choice now, as per the terms of the will. "Take the money, Grace," Richard said, his tone condescending. $75,000 is more than you make in 2 years as a nurse. The shed is literally worthless. We're doing you a favor. Plus, Caroline added, we're demolishing it in 2 weeks anyway. The land's not even worth anything. It's too far from the main property to develop. Grace reached into her pocket and felt the small brass key Samuel had pressed into her palm during his final lucid moments. He'd made her promise not to open it until after the will was read. "I choose the shed," Grace said quietly. The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted in laughter again. "You're joking," Richard said. "Gracie, don't be stupid. That's $75,000. I choose the shed and the land," Grace repeated, her voice firmer. Attorney Morrison nodded. "Very well. Let the record show that Grace Miller has chosen the shed property. The deed will be transferred to her name immediately." Richard stood up. "Well, that was the easiest decision ever. Gracie, you really are the fool of the family, aren't you? At least we don't have to worry about her contesting anything," Caroline said. "She chose garbage over cash." Marcus pulled out his phone. "I'm posting this. My cousin just chose a falling down shed over $75,000. Some people really are their own worst enemy." Attorney Morrison packed his briefcase. "That concludes the reading. Grace, I'll have the deed prepared by tomorrow. Everyone else, your inheritances will be processed within the week." As the family filed out, chattering excitedly about their new wealth, Richard stopped next to Grace. "You know you have to be out of the mansion by tonight, right? This is my house now. I'd say you can stay in your precious shed, but it probably doesn't even have a roof that doesn't leak." Grace stood, clutching her small purse. "I understand." "Good. I want you gone by 6. "Oh, and Gracie?" He leaned close, his voice cruel. "Grandpa was senile at the end. Whatever he told you about that shed, it was just the dementia talking. There's nothing there but 50 years of rust and spiders." By 5:30, Grace had packed her few belongings into her 12-year-old Honda and driven away from the mansion she'd grown up visiting every summer. In her rearview mirror, she could see Richard and Caroline on the front porch, champagne glasses raised, celebrating their victory. But Grace wasn't thinking about them. She was thinking about Samuel's final words. "The shed, Gracie. Everything you need is in the shed. And remember, the combination is your birthday." As the sun set, Grace drove toward the eastern boundary of the property, toward a falling-down tool shed that everyone had dismissed as worthless. But Samuel Miller never made a wrong move, and Grace was about to discover why. Grace's phone buzzed constantly as she drove the bumpy dirt road toward the shed. Group texts from her cousins, each message more mocking than the last. "Marcus, hope you like camping because that shed doesn't have electricity or water." Victoria, just posted about cousin Grace and her inheritance on Facebook. 127 laughing reactions already. Dennis, Richard said you have to be completely off the property by tomorrow morning. He's getting locks changed tonight. And then a text from Richard himself. "Oh, and Gracie, don't bother asking to come back for holidays. You made your choice. You chose a shed over family. Hope it was worth it." Grace pulled over and sat in the darkness, allowing herself 5 minutes to cry. Not because of the cruelty. She'd known for years that her siblings and cousins only cared about money. She cried because Samuel was gone, the one person in the family who'd loved her unconditionally, who'd taught her that character mattered more than wealth. She wiped her eyes and kept driving. The shed sat at the far eastern edge of the property, separated from the main estate by a quarter-mile of woods. Samuel had built it himself in the 1970s when he was still working, and he'd spent countless hours there over the decades. "Never could get away from your grandmother's nagging unless I went to my workshop," he joked with Grace years ago. But there had been something else in his eyes when he talked about the shed, something secretive, something protective. As Grace's headlights illuminated the structure, her heart sank. Her siblings hadn't been exaggerating. The shed was in terrible condition: weathered wood, sagging roof, windows so grimy they were opaque. Weeds grew waist-high around the foundation. The whole thing looked like a strong wind might knock it over. Grace got out of the car and approached the padlocked door. The lock was old but solid, covered in rust. She pulled out the brass key Samuel had given her. It fit perfectly. The lock clicked open, and Grace pulled the door wide. The hinges screamed in protest. She used her phone's flashlight to illuminate the interior. Dust motes danced in the beam. The shed was packed with old tools, hammers, saws, wrenches, all covered in decades of grime. Workbenches lined the walls. Everything smelled of old wood, rust, and motor oil. Grace stepped inside carefully, testing the floorboards. They seemed solid despite the shed's exterior appearance. She swept her phone's light around slowly, taking inventory, and then she saw it. On the far wall at chest height, someone had carved a small flower into one of the wooden support beams. A simple daisy with 5 petals. Grace's breath caught. That was Samuel's signature drawing. He'd drawn that same flower on every birthday card he'd ever given her, starting when she was 5 years old. He'd drawn it on the cast when she broke her arm at 10. He'd sketched it on a napkin at her high school graduation dinner. "When you see the flower, you'll know where to look," Samuel had whispered in the hospital, his voice weak but urgent. "The flower shows the way, Gracie." Grace moved to the beam and ran her fingers over the carving. The wood around it felt different, smoother, newer. She pressed it. Click. A section of the floor beneath the beam, about 3 feet square, shifted slightly. Grace knelt and examined it more closely. What she'd thought was a solid floorboard was actually a carefully disguised panel. She found the edge and lifted. Beneath was a steel safe, built directly into the shed's foundation. It had an old-fashioned combination lock, 3 numbers. Grace stared at it, her heart pounding. Samuel's words echoed, "The combination is your birthday." Her birthday was March 15th, 1996. She tried 03-15-96, nothing. She tried 15-03-96, nothing. Then she remembered. Samuel had always written dates the old way, month and day only. She spun the dial, 0315. Click. The safe opened. Inside, illuminated by her phone's light, Grace saw a metal document box. Her hands shook as she lifted it out. It was heavy, official-looking, with a label that read, "Samuel J. Miller, Patent Documents, Confidential." Grace opened the box. Inside were thick folders of legal documents, all bearing official patent office seals. She pulled out the first one and began reading. United States Patent, TRA 105-563, Industrial Water Filtration System, filed 1976. Inventor, Samuel J. Miller. Her grandfather had invented something that had been granted a patent. She kept reading, pulling out document after document. There were 12 patents in total, all filed between 1975 and 1982, all related to industrial water filtration and purification systems. At the bottom of the box was a leather journal. Grace opened it to the first page, which was dated January 1975. "I've done it. After 8 years of work, I've perfected the filtration system. It can purify industrial wastewater at 10 times the efficiency of current systems, at 1/3 the cost. I've filed the patents under my name alone, told no one in the family. If they knew, they'd want to sell it immediately for whatever quick cash they could get. But these patents are worth more than they can imagine. The technology will be mandatory for petrochemical plants, mining operations, manufacturing facilities. Every major industrial company in the world will need this. I've licensed it to 3 companies already. The royalties are starting to come in. I've set up a separate trust account they don't know about. By the time I'm gone, this will be worth millions. I'm going to give it to the one person in this family who deserves it, the one with the pure heart. I'll know who that is when the time comes." Grace flipped through pages of journal entries documenting Samuel's invention, his licensing deals, his growing disgust with his children's greed. The final entry was dated 2 weeks before his death. "It's Grace. It's always been Grace. She's the only one who came to see me because she loved me, not because she wanted something. She held my hand. She listened to my stories. She didn't check her phone every 5 minutes or make excuses to leave. The patents generate $3 million per month in royalties. I've been depositing it into the trust for 40 years. The account has $847 million in it. Grace will get everything. The patents, the trust, all of it. But she has to choose the shed. She has to show that she values what I valued: hard work, loyalty, love over easy money. If she chooses the cash, she's like the others. But if she chooses the shed because I asked her to, because she trusts me, then she's proven she's different. I've also arranged something else. If Richard and the others try to take the shed or the land from her, and they will because they're greedy and stupid, I've hired the best law firm in the state to protect her. They're already paid for the next 5 years. The documents are in the safe. My Gracie. My good, pure-hearted Gracie. She's going to be just fine. Grace sat on the dusty floor of the shed, tears streaming down her face, holding her grandfather's journal. $847 million. Her grandfather had left her almost $1 billion, hidden in a shed everyone thought was worthless. And in less than 24 hours, her family was coming to demolish it, not knowing they were about to destroy the proof of the largest inheritance in Miller family history. Grace had work to do. Grace spent the night in the shed, reading every document in the safe by the light of her phone and an old camping lantern she found on one of the shelves. The patents were real and active. The technology Samuel had invented in the 1970s had become the industry standard for industrial water filtration worldwide. Every major petrochemical plant, mining operation, and manufacturing facility on Earth used systems based on his designs. The licensing agreements were extraordinary. Samuel had been brilliant in his negotiations. Rather than selling the patents outright, he'd licensed them with ongoing royalty structures. Every single unit installed, every replacement filter, every maintenance contract, Samuel got a percentage. And he'd been right about the scale. The technology was mandatory in dozens of countries due to environmental regulations. Companies had no choice but to use systems based on his patents or face massive fines. Grace found the trust documents. The Miller Legacy Trust, established in 1976, with Samuel as the sole trustee and a worthy heir to be named upon my death as the beneficiary. The current balance: $847,293,245.18, $847 million. Grace had trouble even processing the number. She'd grown up solidly middle class, had put herself through nursing school with loans and scholarships, drove a car with 140,000 miles on it, shared an apartment with 2 roommates. And now, she found the legal documents Samuel had mentioned, a retainer agreement with Crawford, Morrison and Associates, one of the most prestigious law firms in Iowa. The retainer was $2 million already paid. Attached was a letter from the senior partner. Dear Miss Miller, your grandfather retained our firm 6 months ago with specific instructions. Should anyone attempt to contest your inheritance, interfere with your property rights, or in any way harass or threaten you regarding the estate, we are authorized to take immediate and aggressive legal action on your behalf. Samuel provided us with comprehensive documentation of his assets, his intentions, and his concerns about certain family members. We have already filed protective orders with the county court, recorded your deed with additional security provisions, and prepared multiple legal actions should they become necessary. Please contact us at any time, day or night. Your grandfather was very clear. You are to be protected at all costs. Sincerely, Jonathan Crawford, senior partner. Grace checked the time, 2:17 a.m. She was exhausted but too wired to sleep. Her phone had died hours ago, which meant she'd missed what were probably dozens more mocking messages from her family. She organized the documents carefully, photographed every page with her phone once she'd recharged it using the car, and made an inventory. Then she secured everything back in the safe and covered it with the floor panel. By the time the sun rose, Grace had a plan. She drove into town and found a 24-hour copy shop, where she made 3 complete sets of all the patent documents and trust papers. She mailed one set to herself at her apartment, put one in a safe deposit box at the bank, and kept the third in her car. At 8 a.m. she called the law firm. The receptionist put her through immediately. "Miss Miller," Jonathan Crawford's voice was warm and professional. "I've been expecting your call. Your grandfather spoke very highly of you." "Mr. Crawford, I found everything. The patents, the trust, all of it." "Excellent. Then you understand the situation. Your grandfather predicted that your family would attempt to interfere with your inheritance. Has that begun? They're planning to demolish the shed tomorrow. They think it's worthless." "Let them try." Crawford's voice took on an edge. "We have injunctions prepared. The moment they set foot on your property with equipment, they'll be in violation of multiple court orders. I'll have sheriff's deputies and our legal team there at dawn. Trust me, Miss Miller, they will regret any attempt to touch your property." "There's something else," Grace said. "They expelled me from the family mansion yesterday. Told me I'm not welcome anymore. I don't have anywhere to live right now." "That won't be a problem much longer. Once we reveal the trust, you'll be able to purchase any property you wish. In the meantime, may I suggest a hotel? On the firm's account, naturally." "No," Grace said, surprising herself. "I'll stay in the shed. It's mine. My grandfather gave it to me. I'm not letting them chase me away from it." Crawford chuckled. "Samuel said you had backbone. Very well. I'll have a security team stationed discreetly on the property perimeter, just in case your family gets any ideas before tomorrow's scheduled demolition." After hanging up, Grace drove back to the shed. She spent the day cleaning it properly, sweeping out decades of dust, washing the windows, organizing the tools. It was therapeutic work, and it helped her process everything that was happening. She found a small portable heater that still worked, a camping cot in decent condition, and enough supplies to make the shed livable for a few days. It wasn't comfortable, but it was hers. As sunset approached, Grace sat on the cot and opened her phone. 73 messages. She scrolled through them. Richard: "Hope you're enjoying your shack, loser." Caroline: "Can't believe you were so stupid. That 75K would have changed your life." Marcus: "Just so you know, the demolition crew arrives at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Hope you got whatever worthless junk you wanted out of there." Victoria: "Richard says the property was technically part of the mansion's grounds, so the shed demolition is included in his inheritance. Lawyer says you don't actually own it. Oops." Dennis: "Honestly feel bad for you. You actually thought Grandpa left you something valuable? He was senile. The shed is condemned. It's coming down tomorrow whether you like it or not." And then at 6:47 p.m., a group text to the entire family from Richard: "Family meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m., at the main house. We're going to watch the demolition together. Bring champagne. Let's make it a party. Grace, you're welcome to watch your inheritance get turned into a pile of splinters." Grace read the message twice, then set down her phone. "Tomorrow," she said to the empty shed. "Tomorrow they learn the truth." She pulled out Samuel's journal and read the last entry again. "My Gracie is going to be just fine. I hope you're right, Grandpa," she whispered. "I hope you're right." Grace woke at 5 a.m. to the sound of vehicles on the dirt road. She looked out the shed's window and saw 3 black SUVs parking at a discreet distance. Her phone rang. Jonathan Crawford: "Good morning, Miss Miller. My team is in position. We have deputies from the sheriff's office, 2 of our senior attorneys, and a videographer to document everything that happens. When your family arrives with their demolition crew, we'll be ready. Thank you, Mr. Crawford. One more thing. We've prepared a full presentation of the trust documents, patent portfolio, and your legal ownership. When the time is right, we'll make sure your family understands exactly what they've mocked, exactly what they've lost, and exactly how much trouble they're in if they don't apologize and back off permanently." At 7:45 a.m., Grace heard more vehicles. She looked out to see a small bulldozer on a flatbed truck, followed by Richard's Mercedes, Caroline's Range Rover, and the cousins' various luxury cars. They were actually doing it. They were actually coming to demolish her property, throwing a party to watch. Grace stepped outside the shed. The morning was cold, her breath visible in the air. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back. She looked exactly like what they thought she was, a poor defeated young woman who'd made a stupid choice. Richard was the first to notice her. He had a champagne bottle in one hand and was laughing with Caroline. When he saw Grace, his smile widened. "Gracie, you actually spent the night in that dump?" He walked over, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. "I'm almost impressed. Most people would have given up by now." Caroline joined him, designer sunglasses perched on her head despite the cloudy morning. "This is actually kind of sad, Richard. Look at her. She really thought Grandpa left her something valuable." The cousins piled out of their cars, all holding their phones up, recording. Marcus was live streaming on social media. "Okay, everyone," Richard announced loudly. "Let's get this show started. Demolition crew, you're cleared to proceed. Take down this eyesore." A man in a hard hat approached. "Sir, we'll need the property owner's authorization." "I'm the property owner," Richard said. "This shed is on land that's part of the main estate. I inherited the estate, therefore I'm authorizing the demolition." "Actually," a new voice said, "that's not accurate." Everyone turned. Jonathan Crawford walked forward from one of the black SUVs, flanked by 2 other attorneys and 2 sheriff's deputies. "Who the hell are you?" Richard demanded. "Jonathan Crawford, Crawford Morrison and Associates. I represent Miss Grace Miller." He handed Richard a document. "That's an injunction preventing any demolition, construction, or alteration of this structure, and the half-acre parcel it sits on. The property was legally deeded to Miss Miller, as per Samuel Miller's last will and testament. Any attempt to demolish it constitutes criminal trespassing and destruction of private property." Richard's face went red. "This is ridiculous. The shed is worthless. We're doing Gracie a favor by tearing down this hazard." "The value is irrelevant," Crawford said calmly. "It's her property. You have no legal right to touch it." Caroline stepped forward. "Look, this is a family matter. We don't need lawyers involved. Gracie, be reasonable. The shed is falling apart. Let us demolish it and we'll give you the $75,000 Dad offered, cash, today." "No," Grace said quietly. "Excuse me?" Caroline's voice went sharp. "I said no. This is my property. My grandfather gave it to me. It stays." Marcus laughed. "Gracie, you're being insane. You're choosing a pile of junk over $75,000 and your family relationships." "You expelled me from the family yesterday," Grace said. "Told me I was the fool of the family, called me stupid. Richard said I wasn't welcome at holidays. You don't get to pretend you care about family relationships now." "We were joking," Richard said, but his tone wasn't apologetic. It was annoyed. "Come on, Gracie, be smart for once in your life." "I am being smart," Grace said. "Smarter than any of you realize." Jonathan Crawford smiled. "Miss Miller, would you like to tell them? Or should I?" Grace took a deep breath. This was it. The moment everything changed. "Tell us what?" Caroline demanded. "Gracie, what are you playing at?" Grace looked at Richard. "You said Grandpa was senile, that anything he told me was just dementia talking." "Because it was," Richard said. "The old man's mind was gone." "Then explain this." Grace pulled out her phone and showed them a photo of the patent documents. "Explain how someone with dementia filed 12 patents between 1975 and 1982 for an industrial water filtration system that became the global standard." The champagne bottle slipped from Richard's hand, shattering on the gravel. "Explain," Grace continued, "how someone who was senile negotiated licensing agreements with every major petrochemical and mining company in the world." Caroline's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "Grandpa invented something," Grace said. "Something revolutionary, something that generates royalties every single month from thousands of companies in dozens of countries." Jonathan Crawford pulled out his own documents. "Samuel Miller's patents generate approximately $3 million per month in ongoing royalties. They have done so for nearly 40 years. He deposited these royalties into a trust fund, which now contains $847 million. The silence was absolute. "That's impossible," Richard finally said. "Dad was an engineer, yes, but 800 million? 47 million, Crawford corrected. 847 million. And every penny of it goes to Grace, as per the terms of the trust Samuel established. The patents transfer to her ownership. The trust account transfers to her control, all of it, as of the moment she chose the shed over the cash payment." Marcus had gone completely white. You're joking. I don't joke about legal matters, Crawford said. The documentation is all in order. Samuel was very thorough. He knew exactly what he was doing. Caroline turned to Grace, and for the first time there was no mockery in her expression, just dawning horror. You knew. Yesterday when we were all laughing at you, you knew. No, Grace said. I didn't know until last night. Grandpa told me to choose the shed and trust him. So I did. I trusted him when none of you did, and he trusted me when he wouldn't trust any of you. Richard's voice was barely a whisper. $800 million. Was in that shed you wanted to demolish, Grace said. The patent documents were hidden in a safe under the floor. If you'd demolished it, you would have destroyed the only physical proof of Grandpa's invention and my inheritance. Which, Crawford added, would have been criminal destruction of property and would have resulted in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against all of you. Samuel anticipated you might try something like this. That's why he retained our firm 6 months ago. To protect Grace from your greed. Dennis had started crying. Actual tears. We gave up $800 million. We could have had a share if we'd been nicer to Gracie. If we'd... No, Crawford interrupted. You couldn't have. Samuel was very clear. The inheritance was never going to be divided. It was always going to one person, the person who proved they valued love over money. Grace made that choice when she selected the shed over cash. You made your choices when you mocked her for it. Victoria pulled out her phone, frantically scrolling. I posted about Gracie choosing the shed. It's on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Thousands of people have seen it. And now thousands of people will know that you mocked someone for making a choice that resulted in them inheriting almost $1 billion, Crawford said. I'd suggest deleting those posts immediately. Richard dropped to his knees in the gravel. Grace, I'm sorry. We're sorry. We didn't know. Dad never told us about the patents. You thought I was stupid, Grace said. You thought Grandpa was senile. You thought I was the fool of the family. We were wrong, Caroline said, her voice breaking. We were so wrong. Grace, please, we're family. We can work this out. You could share. No, Grace's voice was firm. Grandpa didn't want me to share with you. He watched you for years, saw how greedy you'd become, saw how you treated people. He designed this entire situation to prove who deserved his legacy, and you failed the test. But we're your family, Marcus said desperately. Yesterday you told me I wasn't family anymore, Grace said. You expelled me from the house. You told me not to come back for holidays. You called me the family fool. You threw a party to watch my property be demolished. Does that sound like family to you? None of them had an answer. Jonathan Crawford handed Grace a folder. These are the trust transfer documents. Once you sign them, you'll have full access to the accounts. I'd recommend scheduling a meeting at our office tomorrow to discuss wealth management and estate planning. Grace took the folder, then looked at her siblings and cousins. I want all of you off my property now. Gracie, Richard started. It's Miss Miller, Crawford interrupted. And you're trespassing. Officers? He nodded to the deputies, who stepped forward. We need to escort you all off this property, one deputy said. Ma'am's orders. As her family was herded back to their cars, all of them shell-shocked and several crying, Richard turned back one last time. Grace, just tell me, did Dad really leave me the mansion, or was that fake too? Oh, that's real, Grace said. You got exactly what you valued most. A building, congratulations. As the cars drove away, the demolition crew foreman approached Grace apologetically. Ma'am, I'm so sorry, we had no idea. We were hired by Mr. Richard Miller and told this was his property. We would never have... It's okay, Grace said. You didn't know. Nobody knew, except Grandpa and me. After everyone left, Grace stood alone in front of the shed. Well, not quite alone. Jonathan Crawford remained. Your grandfather was an extraordinary man, he said. The planning that went into this was remarkable. He wanted to teach them a lesson, Grace said, about greed, about what matters. Did you know, Crawford asked. When you chose the shed, did you know what was inside? No, Grace said honestly. I chose it because Grandpa asked me to, because I trusted him, because I loved him more than I loved money. Crawford smiled. That's exactly what he told me you'd say. He said, "My Gracie will choose love over money every time. That's how I know she deserves everything." Grace felt tears on her cheeks. "I miss him so much." "He loved you very much," Crawford said gently. "And he made sure you'd be taken care of, not just financially but legally, emotionally. Every document he left was designed to protect you and punish those who'd been cruel to you. He planned this for years." "What do I do now?" Grace asked. "Whatever you want," Crawford said. "You're one of the wealthiest women in Iowa. One of the wealthiest young women in America, actually. The world is quite literally at your feet." Grace looked at the shed, the dusty, humble shed that everyone had mocked. "I think," she said slowly, "I'm going to honor Grandpa's legacy, his real legacy, not the money, the values." "How so?" "I'll tell you tomorrow," Grace said. "Right now, I just want to sit in Grandpa's workshop and remember him." Crawford nodded and left. Grace went back inside the shed, sat on the old cot and cried. Tears of grief for Samuel, tears of relief that his plan had worked, and tears of gratitude that someone had loved her enough to plan for her future so carefully. On the wall, the carved flower seemed to smile at her in the afternoon light. Grace spent the next 3 days in shock, processing what had happened. The trust documents were real. The patents were real. The $847 million was real. Jonathan Crawford had her meet with wealth managers, accountants, tax attorneys. The money was all legally hers, but managing that level of wealth required expertise she didn't have. The good news, her new financial advisor explained, is that the trust is structured extremely well. Samuel set it up to minimize taxes and maximize growth. The patents still have 12 years of active protection, meaning the royalty stream will continue at current levels until 2035. After that, the technology becomes public domain, but by then the trust will be worth well over $1 billion if properly managed. Grace barely heard him. She kept thinking about Samuel, sitting in that shed for 40 years, quietly building a fortune while his children and grandchildren grew more spoiled and greedy. She read his journal cover to cover 3 times. One passage stood out. March 1994. "Richard came to visit today. Didn't ask how I was feeling. Didn't ask about my life. Just wanted to know if I'd updated my will and what I was leaving him. He actually suggested I die soon so he could start enjoying his inheritance while he's still young enough to appreciate it." His exact words. His mother would be ashamed. I'm ashamed, but I'm also resolved. He gets the mansion because he values buildings over people. He'll get exactly what he deserves. A big, empty house and a hollow life. Another passage from 1998. Caroline visited, brought her new boyfriend. Spent the whole time taking photos of the mansion for her Instagram or whatever it's called. Asked if she could post photos of her future inheritance to make her friends jealous. Didn't hug me. Didn't say she loved me. Just posed for pictures with my furniture, my artwork, my life's work, and smiled about it. She gets the cars because she values appearances over substance. She'll look rich and feel empty. But the passages about Grace were different. June 2019. Grace came to visit. Brought flowers from her garden. Sat with me for 3 hours and just talked. About her work as a nurse, about the patients she'd helped, about a book she was reading. She asked about my life, my work, my inventions. She wanted to know about her grandmother, about our love story. She held my hand. She didn't check her phone once. She didn't ask about money or inheritance. She just loved me. This is the one. She's the one who gets everything. November 2022. Grace moved in to take care of me. Her siblings said she was wasting her time, that I'd die soon anyway. But she came. She bathes me when I can't bathe myself. She feeds me when my hands shake too much. She reads to me when my eyes are too tired. She never complains. She never suggests a nursing home. She just loves me. I'm changing the will tomorrow. Everything goes to Grace, every single penny, because she's the only one who proved that love matters more than money. Grace closed the journal, crying again. Samuel had been testing all of them for years, documenting their cruelty and her kindness, building a case for why she alone deserved his legacy. Her phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "Please, Grace, I'm begging you. I made a mistake. We all did. Can we meet? Can we talk?" She didn't respond. Another text from Caroline. I've been thinking about everything Dad said to me over the years. You're right. I was greedy. I was shallow. I'm sorry. I know sorry isn't enough, but I'm saying it anyway. I lost a sister and $800 million because I valued the wrong things. I'm trying to be better. Grace stared at that message for a long time. Caroline's words seemed genuine, but was it real remorse, or was it just regret about the money? A text from her cousin Victoria. I deleted all my posts about you. I'm mortified. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I'm working on being a better person. And then a text from an unknown number. Miss Miller, this is Thomas Rivera from the New York Times. We're running a story about your inheritance and would like to interview you. The angle is, woman chooses love over money and inherits $847 million. It's a powerful story. Would you be willing to speak with us? Grace turned off her phone. She didn't want to be a story. She didn't want fame or attention. She wanted to honor Samuel's memory and figure out what to do with the enormous responsibility he'd given her. That night, sitting in the shed, Grace made a decision. She would keep the patents and the trust, but she wouldn't keep all the money for herself. That wasn't what Samuel had really wanted. He wanted her to prove she was different from the others, and she would prove it by using the wealth to help others. Grace pulled out a notebook and started planning. 24 hours after her family tried to demolish the shed, Grace called a meeting. She had Jonathan Crawford send formal invitations to Richard, Caroline, Marcus, Victoria, and Dennis. The message was simple. Meeting at the shed property, 2 p.m. today. Attendance mandatory for all parties involved in yesterday's incident. Legal matters to be discussed. They all came, looking nervous and ashamed. Richard's expensive suit was wrinkled. Caroline had been crying. Her makeup was smudged. The cousins looked terrified. Grace stood in front of the shed with Jonathan Crawford beside her. Behind them, the structure looked different now. In just 24 hours, Grace had hired a restoration company. They'd repaired the roof, replaced the broken windows, reinforced the foundation. It still looked old and rustic, but it was no longer falling apart. "Thank you for coming," Grace said formally. "Grace," Richard started. "We need to apologize." Grace held up her hand. "I'm going to talk first." "You're going to listen?" They all nodded. 24 hours ago, you came here to demolish my property. You brought champagne and live-streamed it. You threw a party to celebrate what you thought was my stupidity. You were so confident that Grandpa was senile that I was a fool that this shed was worthless." She paused. "You were wrong about everything." Caroline looked at the ground. Marcus was crying silently. "I've spent the last day reading Grandpa's journals. Did you know he documented everything? Every cruel comment, every greedy demand, every time you ignored him or treated him like an ATM machine. He wrote it all down." Grace pulled out the journal and opened to a marked page. March 15, 2020. "Richard called today, asked if I was planning to die soon because he'd like to put the mansion on the market while property values are high." Those were his words to our grandfather. Richard's face crumbled. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," Grace said. "You meant exactly what you said, and Grandpa knew it. That's why he planned all of this, not to be cruel, to teach you a lesson about what really matters." She closed the journal. "Here's what's going to happen. The inheritance stands as written. I get the patents, the trust, and all associated assets. You get what you were already given in the will. That's not changing." "We understand," Victoria said quietly. "We don't deserve anything more." "You don't," Grace agreed. "But Grandpa left you those inheritances anyway, because even though you disappointed him, you were still his family. He gave you money, property, and security. That was his final gift to you, even though you didn't earn it." She looked at each of them in turn. "I'm not going to be as generous as he was, but I'm also not going to be cruel. So here's my offer, and it's not negotiable." Jonathan Crawford handed her a document. "I'm establishing a foundation," Grace said. "The Miller Family Legacy Foundation. It will fund scholarships for nurses and engineers, people who help others and create things like Grandpa did. I'm seeding it with $20 million from the trust." She looked at Richard. "You're going to donate $100,000 to it?" annually for the rest of your life. Richard blinked. 100,000? Grace, that's a fraction of what you inherited, Grace finished. And a tiny percentage of what you would have inherited if you'd been kind. You can afford it. Consider it your tuition for the lesson Grandpa tried to teach you. She turned to Caroline. 50,000 annually from you. Caroline nodded immediately. Yes, of course, thank you. Marcus, Victoria, Dennis, 25,000 each annually. They all agreed instantly. This isn't charity for you, Grace said. This is you learning to give back, learning that wealth means responsibility, learning what Grandpa tried to teach you all for years. She handed the document to Jonathan Crawford. If anyone misses a payment or tries to contest these terms, they will be barred from any future contact with me and will be publicly identified as the people who mocked their grandfather's legacy and their cousin's inheritance. The story will go to every major newspaper. Mr. Crawford has already prepared the press releases. The threat was clear. Public shame was the one thing her status-obsessed family couldn't handle. Does everyone understand? Grace asked. They all nodded. Good. Mr. Crawford will send you the paperwork. You have 30 days to make your first contribution. As they turned to leave, Grace said, One more thing. They stopped. I'm going to transform this shed into something meaningful. Grandpa spent 40 years here, building the future. I'm going to honor that. I haven't decided exactly what yet, but when I do, I'll let you know. And you will support it publicly and financially, because this isn't just my inheritance. It's Grandpa's legacy, and all of you are going to help me protect it. After they left, Jonathan Crawford smiled. That was masterfully done. They'll pay. They're too afraid of public humiliation not to. I don't want revenge, Grace said. I want them to learn, to change, to be better. Your grandfather would be proud, Crawford said. You didn't hoard the wealth. You didn't punish them cruelly. You found a middle path. Is that legally binding? Grace asked. Can I actually make them donate? No, Crawford admitted, but they don't know that. The threat of publicity is enough, and honestly 100,000 a year is nothing to Richard. He'll pay it just to avoid the embarrassment. Grace looked at the shed. I think I know what I want to do with this place. Oh, a community center, Grace said, for people who are struggling. Job training, counseling, financial literacy, all free. Run it out of this building, on this land. Keep it modest and humble, just like Grandpa was. Show people that greatness doesn't require mansions and luxury cars. Sometimes it just requires dedication and a workshop. Crawford smiled. I think Samuel would love that. One more thing, Grace said. I want to set up a trust for any children my siblings have in the future. Their parents failed Grandpa's test, but the next generation shouldn't be punished for that. Small trusts, enough for education and getting started in life. But with conditions, they have to volunteer, maintain good grades, and prove they understand that wealth is a responsibility, not just a privilege. You're a remarkable person, Miss Miller, Crawford said. Most people who suddenly inherit this much money become corrupted by it. You're using it to help others. That's what Grandpa wanted, Grace said simply. He didn't leave me the money to make me rich. He left it to me because he trusted me to do the right thing with it. She pulled out her phone and looked at the messages from her family. The apologies, the begging, the regret. She replied to Caroline's message. Thank you for your apology. I'm willing to work on rebuilding our relationship, but it will take time, and it starts with you proving you've changed. She didn't reply to Richard. He'd been the cruelest, and she needed more time before she was ready to forgive him. But she replied to Victoria, Apology accepted. Let's start over. It was a small step, but it was something. Grace looked at the shed, her inheritance, her grandfather's gift, and felt peace for the first time since his death. Samuel Miller had never made a wrong move, and thanks to him, Grace never would either. 3 months later, the Miller Family Legacy Foundation held its grand opening. The shed had been transformed. The exterior was restored to its original 1970s appearance, rustic, humble, honest. But inside it was now a state-of-the-art community center with computer labs, counseling rooms, a library, and classroom space. A large plaque outside read, Samuel J. Miller Community Center, where wisdom is passed to the next generation. Grace stood in the main room watching as the first groups of students arrived for the free nursing scholarship program and engineering mentorship initiative. She'd hired 3 full-time counselors and 2 job coaches. Everything was free, funded by the trust. The local news was there, covering the opening. Grace had finally agreed to one interview, carefully controlled by Jonathan Crawford. "Miss Miller," the reporter asked, "your inheritance made national headlines. The story of choosing a shed over cash and inheriting nearly $1 billion has become legendary. What do you want people to know about this center?" "That it's not about the money," Grace said. "It's about the values my grandfather represented. He was an engineer who invented something that helped industries worldwide become more environmentally responsible. He was a man who valued creation over consumption, substance over appearance. This center is about teaching the next generation those same values. Your family members are here today," the reporter noted. "That's surprising, given the circumstances." Grace glanced over at Richard and Caroline, who stood awkwardly in the corner. They'd made their donations. They'd apologized publicly. They'd shown up today because Grace had asked them to. "They're learning," Grace said carefully. "My grandfather designed this entire situation to teach a lesson about greed and humility. I think the lesson is sinking in." After the interview, Richard approached Grace. "Can we talk?" Privately. They stepped outside, walking the perimeter of the half-acre property. "I've been going to therapy," Richard said. "Caroline and I both have, to deal with everything. The therapist asked me when was the last time I did something just because it was right, not because it benefited me. I couldn't remember." He stopped walking. "Grace, I was a terrible brother, a terrible son, a terrible grandson. I measured everything by money and status. When Dad died and left you the shed, I thought you were stupid, but you were wise. You trusted him. You valued love over cash, and I mocked you for it." "You did," Grace said. "I can't take it back," Richard said, "but I can try to be better. The donation I'm making, the 100,000 annually, I want to increase it, double it. Not because you're forcing me, because it's the right thing to do, because Dad would want me to support what you're building." Grace studied her brother's face. He looked older than his 42 years. Grief and shame had aged him. "I'll accept that," she said. "But Richard, I don't want your money if it's just guilt. I want you to actually change, to volunteer here, to mentor someone, to give back because you genuinely want to help, not because you're trying to buy forgiveness." "I will," Richard said. "I promise I'm going to be better. The brother you deserved all along." Caroline joined them, having apparently been waiting for the right moment. "Grace, I've started volunteering at a homeless shelter, twice a week. It's hard work, exhausting actually, but it feels good. For the first time in years, I'm doing something that isn't about me." "That's good," Grace said. "I'm also working on reconciling with Dad's memory," Caroline said. "I'm reading his journals, the copies Mr. Crawford gave us. Every page is like a knife, seeing how I disappointed him, how greedy I was. But I'm reading them anyway because I need to face what I did, who I was." She wiped her eyes. "You deserve this inheritance, Grace. You earned it by being kind when we were cruel, by caring when we were indifferent, by choosing love over money. I'm just grateful you're still willing to talk to us at all." Marcus, Victoria, and Dennis approached as a group. They'd been volunteering at the center every Saturday, helping set up equipment and organize supplies. "We wanted to say something," Victoria began nervously. "We've been talking, the 3 of us, about what happened, about what we did. We were awful," Marcus said. "We live-streamed mocking you. We threw a party to watch your property be demolished. We called you the family fool." "And we were the fools," Dennis added, "because we didn't understand what Grandpa Samuel was teaching us. That real wealth isn't money, it's character. And you have more character than all of us combined." Grace felt tears forming. "Thank you. That means a lot. We want to do more," Victoria said. "The donations are fine, but we want to actually help. Marcus is an accountant. He wants to volunteer helping people here with financial literacy. Dennis is good with computers. He can teach classes. I don't have useful skills, but I can learn. I'll do whatever you need. We want to earn your forgiveness," Marcus said. Or at least try. Grace looked at her cousin, seeing genuine remorse. Okay, let's start there. Let's build something good together. As the evening approached and the opening celebration continued, Grace stood alone for a moment in the workshop section of the center, the part where Samuel's original tools were displayed in glass cases, preserved as historical artifacts. She touched the glass covering his favorite hammer, the one he'd used to build the shed itself. I hope you're proud, Grandpa, she whispered. I'm trying to do what you'd want. I'm trying to use this gift to help people, to teach the lessons you taught me. A hand touched her shoulder. Grace turned to see an elderly woman, one of the nursing students' grandmothers, who'd come to the opening. Your grandfather would be very proud, the woman said softly. I knew Samuel Miller back in the 70s. He was the kindest man, brilliant but humble. He helped my husband get a job when no one else would hire him, never asked for anything in return, just helped because it was right. She smiled. This center, what you're doing here, this is Samuel's real legacy, not the money, the values. You're passing them forward, just like he'd want. You're a lot like him, dear, and that's the highest compliment I can give. After the woman left, Grace stood in the workshop and cried, tears of grief, gratitude, and hope all mixed together. Samuel Miller never made a wrong move, and through careful planning, wisdom, and love, he'd ensured that his granddaughter would carry his values forward, transforming a humble shed into a beacon of hope for others. The family had mocked her for choosing the old shack. 24 hours later, they'd regretted it. 3 months later, they were learning from it. And Grace knew that the real inheritance wasn't the $847 million. It was the lessons Samuel had taught her, that love, humility, and integrity are worth more than all the money in the world. She was going to spend the rest of her life proving it. 1 year after Samuel Miller's death, Grace stood in front of the community center for a special ceremony. The Miller Family Legacy Foundation had helped 127 people in its first year. 43 had completed job training programs. 18 had earned nursing scholarships. 21 had graduated from the engineering mentorship program. The rest had received counseling, financial literacy training, or career guidance. Every single one of them had been helped for free, funded by Samuel's patents and trust. The local mayor was there to present Grace with a community service award. The state governor had sent a letter of commendation, but Grace had insisted the ceremony focus on the people who'd been helped, not on her. My grandfather, Samuel Miller, spent 40 years of his life working in a modest workshop, creating technology that would benefit the world, Grace said in her speech. He didn't do it for money or fame. He did it because he believed in using his talents to help others. She gestured to the building behind her. This center is his real legacy, not the patents or the trust fund. This, people being helped, lives being changed, knowledge being passed forward. Richard stood in the crowd with his family. He'd kept his promise. He'd been volunteering twice a month, mentoring young business students. Caroline was there too, having just completed a certification in non-profit management so she could help run similar centers in other cities. The cousins had all found their places. Marcus taught financial literacy classes every week. Victoria had discovered she was good with kids and now ran the youth programs. Dennis managed all the center's technology and had taught computer skills to dozens of people. But the biggest change was in the family dynamics. They'd started having monthly dinners again, not at the mansion, but at a local restaurant, splitting the bill equally. They'd begun rebuilding relationships based on respect rather than money. After the ceremony, Grace walked through the center, watching the evening classes in session. In one room, nursing students studied anatomy. In another, engineering students worked on design projects. In a third, job seekers practiced interview skills. She stopped in the workshop section, where Samuel's tools were still displayed. A new addition had been made, a large photo of Samuel from the 1970s, standing in front of the original shed, holding a wrench and smiling. Beneath it, a quote from his journal, "Real wealth is not what you have, but what you give. True legacy is not what you leave behind, but who you inspire forward." Grace's phone buzzed. A text from Jonathan Crawford. The patents generated 3.2 metas this month. The trust is now worth 891 meta. You're doing extraordinary work with it." She didn't reply. The numbers didn't matter anymore. She'd learned what Samuel had tried to teach his whole family. Wealth was a tool, not a goal. A young woman approached Grace, Maria, one of the first nursing scholarship recipients. "Miss Miller, I wanted to thank you. I graduated last week. I got a job at Iowa Methodist. I start Monday." "That's wonderful, Maria," Grace said. "Congratulations. I wouldn't have been able to afford school without your scholarship," Maria said. "My family, we didn't have anything. I was working 3 jobs just to survive. Your grandfather's foundation gave me a chance. And now I'm going to be a nurse. I'm going to help people just like you're helping people." She hugged Grace impulsively. "Thank you for everything." After Maria left, Grace felt a profound sense of peace. This was why Samuel had left her everything. Not because she was his favorite, because he knew she'd use it the right way. She walked outside and sat on a bench by the shed's entrance. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the half-acre property. A car pulled up, an old Honda Civic. A young man got out, looking nervous. He approached Grace. "Are you Miss Miller?" "I am. My name is David Chen. I'm homeless. I've been living in my car for 3 months. I lost my job, couldn't make rent, everything fell apart." He was crying. "Someone told me about this place, said you help people, said you don't judge. I don't have money, I don't have anything, but I need help." Grace stood and walked to him. "David, you came to the right place. Let's get you inside. We'll get you some food, connect you with our job coaches, and help you figure out next steps." Just like that, David looked stunned. "You don't need paperwork or proof or—" "My grandfather built this place on a principle," Grace said, "that everyone deserves a chance, that dignity matters more than money. Come on, let's get you sorted out." As she led David into the center, Grace thought about that day 1 year ago when her family had laughed at her choice, when they'd called her the family fool, when they'd thrown a party to demolish what they thought was worthless. They'd been so wrong. The shed wasn't worthless. It never had been. It held Samuel's greatest invention, not the water filtration system, but the moral test he'd designed for his family, a test that revealed who they really were and what they truly valued. Grace had passed that test, and now she was using the reward to help others pass their own tests, tests of poverty, of hardship, of circumstance. That night, after the center closed and everyone had gone home, Grace returned to the workshop one final time. She stood in front of Samuel's photo and smiled. "I hope I'm making you proud, Grandpa," she said softly. "I'm trying to be the person you believed I was. I'm trying to build a legacy of kindness, not just wealth." She pulled out the brass key he'd given her. She wore it on a chain around her neck now, always close to her heart. "Thank you," she whispered, "for trusting me, for testing them, for teaching us all that the richest inheritance isn't money, it's values." The workshop was quiet except for the faint hum of the building's heating system, but Grace could almost hear Samuel's voice, the way he used to speak to her when she was young. "You're going to do great things, Gracie. Not because of the money, because of who you are. You have the most important thing anyone can have, a good heart, and that's worth more than all the patents in the world." Grace locked up the center and walked to her car, still the same 12-year-old Honda. Though she could afford any vehicle she wanted, some things didn't need to change. She drove back to her apartment, still the same modest 2-bedroom she'd shared with roommates. Though they'd moved out and she could now afford a mansion, she'd chosen to stay because it kept her grounded. Wealth hadn't changed who Grace was. It had simply given her the tools to be who she'd always been, a helper, a healer, a woman who valued people over possessions. The family had mocked her for choosing the old shack. 24 hours later, they'd all regretted it. 1 year later, they'd all learned from it. And for the rest of their lives, they'd remember the lessons Samuel Miller had taught them, that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch and the love you share. Grace Miller, the woman they'd called the family fool, had inherited not just a fortune but a mission, and she was going to spend every day honoring it. Because Samuel Miller never made a wrong move, and neither would she. If Grace's story moved you, Please subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. We share powerful true stories every week about people who chose character over convenience, values over valuables, and love over luxury. Leave a comment below. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever made a choice everyone called foolish that turned out to be wise? Share your story. Someone reading might need the encouragement today. Grace and Samuel teach us profound truths about wealth, family, and legacy. They teach us that real wealth isn't measured by what you own, but by what you're willing to give. Samuel could have split his fortune equally among all his heirs. Instead, he designed an elaborate test to find the one person who'd use it responsibly. They teach us that character reveals itself under pressure. When faced with a choice between easy money and a humble inheritance, Grace chose trust and love. Her siblings chose greed and mockery. Those choices revealed who they truly were. Most importantly, they teach us that legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about who you inspire forward. Samuel didn't just leave Grace money. He left her a mission, a set of values, and the tools to change lives. And Grace honored that by transforming wealth into opportunity for others. For anyone facing mockery for making unpopular choices, for anyone who's been called foolish for choosing love over money, for anyone who's been underestimated by their family, remember Grace. Remember that the people who mock you for your values today may be begging for your forgiveness tomorrow. And remember Samuel's wisdom. True inheritance isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you touch, the values you uphold, and the legacy you build through kindness. Grace chose a falling down shed over $75,000. Her family laughed. 24 hours later, they discovered she'd inherited $847 million and learned the most expensive lesson of their lives, that greed reveals character, humility builds legacy, and love is always the wisest investment. Thank you for joining us for this incredible story. Share it with someone who needs to remember that wisdom often looks like foolishness to those who value the wrong things. We'll see you in the next story.